So I created this video a little while ago and low-key it went kind of wild, and so I wanted to come back on here and do another video where I respond to the archaeology and anthropology of a new Netflix show. And guess what came out at the end of February? That is right, Outer Banks season 3, and I'm a huge fan. I love the show. I think it is so fun and exciting. But in season 3, we get to see the characters searching for the one and only Dorado. And El Dorado has some archaeological foundations there. So we're going to get into the fact or fiction of OBX season 3. So if that sounds interesting to you, definitely stick around. Also, really quickly, hello, my name is Alivia and I make videos about anthropology every single Monday. So if that sounds interesting, definitely subscribe to the channel, but on to the video. Now, Outer Banks takes place in a region of North Carolina called, you guessed it, the Outer Banks, and it's a pretty divided community between the wealthy people and the working class people and poor people. Now, the wealthy people in this community are known as kooks, and the working class people are known as pogues. And in season 1, we follow a group of pogues who find themselves on a crazy whirlwind treasure hunt. And naturally, in season 3, things have escalated completely. And rather than looking for some gold on a sunken ship, they're looking for an entire city of gold. Now, really quickly, I did want to mention that there are going to be quite a few spoilers in this video since we're literally analyzing the archaeology of Outer Banks. So if you are not caught up, come back at another time just because I don't want to ruin the show for you. Okay, first things first, everybody. El Dorado. What is it? What's fact and what's fiction? So El Dorado today in popular culture tends to be thought of something that's largely a legend, but I'm here to tell you that there's actually some truth behind the legend of El Dorado. So El Dorado more commonly is known as the City of Gold, and this is a place that was actually sought after by Europeans during the colonization of the New World. Now today El Dorado is more of a legend, but there is some truth to it. And first things first, we're going to be starting with the phrase El Dorado. Now, when most people hear El Dorado, they think it directly translates to the City of Gold, but this is actually not at all the case. El Dorado actually translates to the Gilded One, not the City of Gold. So when the Spanish were exploring the New World, they'd basically heard of a tribe living in the Andes that had an extreme level of wealth. So much wealth that when they celebrated their chief, they would cover him in gold and precious resources. And during this celebration, they would throw gold and again, precious, valuable materials into the lake, right? And the Spanish hear this and they think, wow, if someone can just chuck these precious resources into the lake and cover their chief, there must be this city of gold, right? And so again, this is something that the Spanish had heard. And so naturally, they started looking for it because who doesn't want a bunch of gold? Now, remember how I told you that El Dorado translates to the Gilded One? Maybe the pieces are starting to come together a little bit, I'm not sure. But the Gilded One actually refers to the chief of these people, not the actual city, all right? So yeah, whoa, I hope your mind is already exploding because when I was researching all this stuff, mine certainly was. Here's the thing, everybody. So the Spaniards up to this point had actually found gold in the New World. So when they heard these rumors of a tribe living in the Andes that had a bunch of gold, it wasn't an impossible thing to think was real. And I'm here to tell you that this tribe did exist. They were very real. And in the 1600s, they were an advanced civilization living in the Andes known as the Muisca. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Hopefully I am. And unfortunately, again, in the 1600s, the Spanish did come and they did exploit these people. It literally got to a point where the Spaniards drowned this lake that they'd heard they'd thrown all these precious resources into just so they could find all the gold. And it turns out that the Spanish did actually find gold in this lake that they drowned. They just didn't find as much as they thought they would because, again, they'd heard of this city of gold. But it clearly wasn't. Now, we do know from the archaeological record that the Muisca people did actually use gold. This is something that they did have access to, and they actually created beautiful art out of it. And the gold that they had access to was actually a gold alloy. So it was about 80% gold and then 20% a mix of silver and other materials. Now, unfortunately, a lot of it hasn't preserved. We don't actually have access to very much of it. Some of it is in museums. I'll put, if I can find any like copyright-free images of it, I'll put a photo of some of the most famous art on the screen. But interestingly, the Muisca people didn't actually see this gold that they had access to as a symbol of wealth like the Spanish did. So when they were throwing it into the river, it wasn't them like tossing away money. It was them like doing a celebration of their chief. So again, you can see how lines kind of got crossed there. Okay, so now we're going to be diving into the Outer Banks fact versus fiction, and I'm very excited. I told you guys that I really enjoyed this show, and I'm actually was pretty impressed by the amount of like fact or like based on fact moments that the show had. But of course, there's quite a bit of fiction in there too. So we're gonna dive right in. Okay, so the first fact that I'm going to be talking about is the Orinoco River. And in Outer Banks Season 3, we see our cast of Pogues traveling up the Orinoco River to go and find the City of Gold, right? First of all, the Orinoco River is real, so good work on that part. But also, there's actually a history with the Orinoco and people looking for the City of Gold. Basically, there was this English courtier, I don't know how to say that word, named Sir Walter Raleigh, who traveled down to South America in the hopes of finding the City of Gold. And he brought his son down to South America with him. I think he was either sick or too old. But long story short, he couldn't actually go to where he believed the City of Gold was. So what you gonna do but send the kid? So he sent his son up the Orinoco River in hunt of El Dorado because this is where they thought it was located. Now, unfortunately, Sir Walter Raleigh's son was killed by the Spanish, which is really very tragic. And again, the City of Gold was not found on this journey up the Orinoco River. But I did find it really interesting that the show Outer Banks actually based their characters' like choices and travel off of this thing that actually did happen in our history. Like there are actual people who traveled up the Orinoco River because that's where they thought the City of Gold was located. Now, the next fact that we have in this little exploration of fact versus fiction is that in Outer Banks, they talk about how there's like this line of bodies, or like so many people have died looking for the City of Gold, right? I mean, it's a City of Gold. You're gonna put your life on the line if you want to get something like that. But this is actually, to some extent, true. People have actually died in search of El Dorado. However, in Outer Banks, it's portrayed as a big like treasure hunt type vibe, whereas in real life, it was more of a colonization type vibe. We do not support on this channel, but people have died, both the colonizers and the colonized, which is just terrible. And again, that is completely left out of Outer Banks Season 3. But again, it is true that people have died looking for this place of like mass wealth and riches. Now, unfortunately, most of the show is fiction. I hate to break it to you guys if that's what you were expecting on today's video. Yeah, I mean, you couldn't have all the crazy things that happen in the show if it was real. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to be talking about in this like fiction section of the video today is, so in Season 1, we have everybody looking for the Royal Merchant, which is the ship that sank with a bunch of gold, right? Then in Episode 2, we follow our cast of characters looking for the Cross of Santo Domingo, which again is like this beautiful gold cross. And again, Season 3 is the hunt for El Dorado. Well, in Season 3, this idea is put forth that, you know, where was the Royal Merchant coming from? Where did all that gold start in the first place? And the, result is, of course, El Dorado. Now, interestingly, the Royal Merchant from Season 1, that ship, is actually based on a real ship that did sink, supposedly with a lot of gold on it that's never been found. Now, that ship was called the Merchant Royale, or the Merchant Royal. Again, I'm not quite sure how to say that, but in real life, okay, sorry, there's a lot of switching back and forth. In real life, the Merchant Royale has absolutely nothing to do with El Dorado. That ship was not coming from El Dorado or a very wealthy place in South America. I do really like that, the show is basing certain things off of what really happened. And as a side note, I think the Cross of Domingo is either entirely made up or a reference to literature. So yeah. The next thing, of course, is the cipher. So towards the end of the season, we see John B., Sarah Cameron, John B. Rutledge, the dad, you know who I'm talking about, using this like language and a cipher to translate, to crack the code on how to find El Dorado. Guys, all of this stuff is completely fake. I mean, you could probably tell from like the glowing stones and like walls opening up and tunnels and all this stuff that all the like language translations and the cipher and all that jazz is completely made up. So kind of anything that looks like a little fantastical, you can safely assume that that's not real, in part because El Dorado, the city of gold, has not actually ever been found, likely because it doesn't exist and the Europeans misunderstood the Muisca people. Now, I hope you guys enjoyed this exploration of Outer Banks and archaeology, fact or fiction. I love archaeology. I think it's, so fun. I love anthropology. And let me know if you guys have any other shows that you'd like me to do this kind of analysis for, because I'm actually having a lot of fun with it. And it was really fun to do all that research on El Dorado. Sources linked down below. And don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you guys next Monday. Bye.